Good afternoon. It's a privilege for me to be here and to discuss with you issues regarding attention deficit disorder, treatment or no treatment. I think my conclusion would be yes and no. This is who we're dealing with. This is the famous adolescent. This comes as a drawing from the famous German drawing. The original work of hyperactivity, one can trace back to the German physician, Dr. Heinrich Hoffmann, and he wrote about a young fellow called der Struwwelpeter. So this is a drawing of what happens when this little boy grows up to be a teenager and is causing problems for his mother because of his hyperactivity, his impulsivity, his inability to pay attention, and what happens to this little fellow when he becomes an adult. And he still has the same problems, and it hasn't been solved. It becomes a problem, I think, for all of us in society. This is an article I wrote for the journal called Disease a Month, in which we traced what happens with attention deficit across the lifespan. The concern is that it's just not little boys or little girls. It goes across the lifetime, so we can argue the exact epidemiology, the prevalence of attention deficit disorder. Well, through many studies, we know it does exist. And if it does exist in your 5, 6, 7, 10-year-old patient, it doesn't go away. So what do we do? Do we put them into therapy forever? Do we put them on medication forever? Do we just ignore it and hope it goes away? That's the issue. This isn't just a pediatric problem. It's a problem across the lifespan. And so it does become, I think, a serious issue. I think over the past 50, 60 years, we've learned that this thing called ADHD, ADD, I'll use it in combination, is a neurobehavioral disorder with abnormalities in the neurotransmitter systems and characterized by, in different degrees, they can't pay attention, they are impulsive, they are hyperactivity, but some kids only present with attention dysfunction. And the question is, if we use medication, what do we treat? Are we treating their hyperactivity, their impulsivity? Parents come in and say, I can't stand this little guy, help me. And you start putting him on medication, and he seems to outgrow it, or doesn't seem to work over time. Maybe, so the question is, we have these three elements that kind of intertwine. What do we treat? What are we looking for in terms of our treatment? We do know through some amazing studies being done now, PET scans, we have a lot of central nervous system studies coming out, and we'll learn more in the next 10, 20, 30 years as this research gets more and more extensive. We know that there is an inheritability factor, perhaps 75 to 80%. There are now 7 identified genes, so that if a parent has ADHD, they have a pretty high degree of passing something about this disease, condition, disorder onto their kids. 70 to 80% is pretty high. That's almost the same as a height. If you have tall parents, you're going to have a pretty high chance of being tall yourself. That's much higher than passing on asthma, passing on epilepsy, passing on most diseases that we deal with. That's amazing. So it's an entity that if the father has it, the mother has it, the child often has it. And this is why you see diversion, where you treat the child and you suddenly find out that the child isn't getting the medication, the father, the mother, somebody else in the family also has this condition and finds out, guess what, when I get on this medication, I somehow feel better. So even the motor activity we know is related to a dopaminergic activity. The question is, should we treat that? Are we to treat motor activity and ignore the rest, or if somebody comes in mainly with that's the concern of the parent, is that what we treat or not? We know that stimulants will help that, but perhaps we shouldn't do that. Here's a typical example of a young man that comes into my office at my clinic at Michigan State, perhaps in your office, 16-year-old high school student brought to you because his parents are concerned about constant detention at school, refusal to do homework, academic probation despite higher than average intelligence. And the interesting thing about ADHD has no link with intelligence. You got high intelligence, low, in the middle. It's a different entity. A minor car accident while driving, recent arrest for driving under the influence. He fits the der Struwwelpeter very well. This is the Dennis the Menace. This is a youngster that come in and say, put this kid on medication and make my problems go away. Maybe the teachers have identified this as well. So we do a life history, we do a report from the parents, we do rating scales, we do a careful medical history,